Hello everyone, this is Rick and welcome to Astral Club. Today we're going to hear a video about a personal hero of mine, Robert Monroe, who I consider the modern father of astral projection. He had a great influence on my life starting when I was in middle school. Before that time, I had started astral projecting since I was a very small child. And at that time, I thought everyone could do it, and I wasn't shy about sharing my experiences. But I found out pretty quickly when I was eavesdropping on my parents as they were discussing taking me to a doctor, psychologist, psychiatrist. I was too young to understand exactly what these types of doctors were, but based on their hushed and tense tones, I could tell it wasn't a good thing. So from then on, I kept my experiences to myself. And for all I knew, for many years, I was the only person who did this, who left his body on a regular basis and flew about my neighborhood and gradually exploring the earth and going to places like the moon. I would go to my local library as I got older, looking for any types of information that might shed light on what this experience was all about. Why was I doing this strange thing? I grew up in a small town in the 60s and the 70s, so nobody heard about astral projection. No one heard about out-of-the-body experiences. This was far, far outside of the realm of experience of the people that I grew up with. These were good, salt-of-the-earth people with, aspirations of growing up and graduating from high school and getting a good job at one of the manufacturing facilities in town. These were not people who were trying to explore altered states of consciousness. So as I did my secret investigations, I would run across old legends from Native Americans, from Africa, from the Aboriginal peoples, from Tibetan and ancient Egyptian holy books referring to things like the Ka, leaving the physical body and exploring the astral planes. So I knew that what I was doing wasn't completely out of the realm of humankind's experience, but it was very much a legendary type of activity. And then one day, in the mid-70s, when I was in middle school, I tripped across a book by a man known as Robert Monroe, and the book was Journeys Out of the Body. This book was the first time that I read a modern book written by someone who was still alive, who experienced the types of experiences leaving his body, exploring different dimensions, learning about the spirit planes. And I was just captivated because I didn't know something like this even existed. And here I was learning from this man. And he wasn't some hippie. And certainly, in the 70s, we didn't like hippies very much. And, they were always taking drugs and they didn't bathe. And the last thing I wanted to be was a hippie. But here, this guy was a businessman. He was born in 1915, Indiana. And he had made a career for himself in TV and broadcasting. And he had built a very nice business. And then suddenly, one day in 1958, he had an out-of-the-body experience spontaneously. And he didn't quite know what to make of it at the time. And so he started a research division within his company that focused on sleep disorders, sleep patterns, learning, altered states of consciousness. And eventually he would found the Monroe Institute, which exists to this day in the early 70s. And I was lucky enough to attend classes and to meet my hero, to meet Bob Monroe, who was a funny guy. Deep, but a funny guy. But what I liked about him, though, is he was a businessman, just like I was. He was somebody scientifically grounded. He wasn't smoking lots of different drugs. He wasn't dropping LSD. Here's someone who honestly wanted to explore this out-of-the-body experience and look at it from some sort of a scientific viewpoint and to see if you could get to the bottom of this experience and try to quantify it scientifically. Bob would go on to write 3 books, Journeys Out of the Body, of course, Far Journeys, and eventually Ultimate Journey. And I have all 3 books to this day. Most of them, though, are newer versions because I don't loan books, I give them. So many times if I've given away a book or an astral projection book, I have to buy another copy. I also have the digital copies as well, so that wherever I go, they're always with me. At his institute, there were not only people like myself, there was also other corporate executives, people from companies like DuPont, the U.S. Army Intelligence Agency sent people there, he told me. And it was just a wide variety of very intelligent, sure, there was some hippie types, but for the most part, they were very grounded people, intellectually curious, trying to explore this phenomena, this out-of-the-body experience. I went looking. I wish I could interview Bob. Unfortunately, he passed in 1995, and trying to contact him such that he could be heard would probably be a very, very major undertaking. So what I was able to do was to find an old interview that he conducted so that you could hear him describe his experiences, his beliefs in his own words. And I thought that I could go through some of these questions. And you can hear Bob Monroe speak, i.e. through my voice. And we can find out a little bit more about what this great man, this father of modern astral projection, what he really stood for, and what he believed, and the incalculable benefits that his research has bestowed on folks like myself, and I'm sure many of the people listening to this video. The interviewer asked him, today many people seem to be talking about going beyond the physical plane. Books dealing with near-death experiences and out-of-the-body experiences are now on the bestseller lists, and Hollywood has recently given us countless films on the subject. You are, by acclamation, the leader in the field of out-of-the-body experiences. Tell us, how did you get involved? Bob said that my background and training is in electrical engineering with a couple of years of pre-med. He could never accept something simply as a belief. He always had to convert it to a scientific method. When something happens, it's interesting, but it may not be reality. Statistically, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th time it occurs, then you can really verify it. And that's what happened to him. He took a full year to convert a series of events to verify what really happened to him, and to actually eventually publish his book, Journeys Out of the Body. In 1956, his broadcasting company, he wanted to diversify it, so he decided to do research into learning how people sleep and to attempt to accelerate learning methods using sleep as the medium to work with. He was in a research lab going through a sound session when he noticed a particular vibrational state happening to his body as he was about to go into a sleep state. He said it didn't hurt. It wasn't a physical shaking. It wouldn't come under a seizure or an epileptic disorder. It wasn't unpleasant. So what was it? As he would lay down to sleep, it would begin to occur. And, from time to time, he would resist it, and it would fade. The interviewer asked him, did it feel like an electrical current? He said, no. it didn't feel electrical or physical. It sort of felt like paralysis. And he went through a number of studies trying to figure out what was causing this sensation. And it would happen periodically over the next couple of years. Eventually, in 1958, he was lying on his bed and he was waiting for these vibrations to stop. And he started thinking to himself, the cold front has come through. He was always big into flying, so weather mattered a lot to Bob. There's going to be a lot of northwest wind up at Berksboro, where I do all my sailplane flying. And he was thinking how those nice thermals would be in addition to the ridge lifts. And that's when he found himself bouncing against something. He found out that he was bouncing against an odd flat floor. What looked like a fountain sticking up out of it. He turned around and realized that he was bouncing up against the ceiling and that the fountain was a chandelier hanging upside down. He looked down and he saw it was his bedroom. He thought, this is a strange dream, but he wasn't frightened. From his perch in the ceiling, he looked down on the bed, and there he saw his wife, and he saw someone in bed with her. He thought in an amused way, whom would I dream to be in bed with my wife? With a great shock, he saw that it was him. It didn't frighten him, though. And although he did think, is he passing? Is he going through the passing on process? So he started getting a little concerned, and he frantically swam through the air and plopped back into his body. He sat up now a little panicked. He found his wife sound asleep beside him, and everything was quiet. He didn't go back to sleep that night and went to the doctor the next day. Now, luckily, he knew some psychological people. And the person who examined him was a psychologist, but he also knew Bob very well. So he knew Bob was not suffering from some breakdown or from some serious psychological disease. And while we're talking about this, let me say something to you. If you ever find yourself seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist for any problems or any kind of analysis, be very careful about what you say when you discuss, or if you decide to discuss, astral projection. Because to someone who is not knowledgeable about the topic, they might think you're experiencing depersonalization, which is a psychiatric disorder. And they'll want to put you through some sort of treatment and or give you medication to help you suppress this. If you must discuss your experiences with them, call them lucid dreams. Now, you and I know there's a difference between astral projection and lucid dreams, but believe me, just call them lucid dreams. That way you can discuss the experiences without getting yourself into a weird, mistaken diagnosis. At any rate, the doctors gave him a clean bill of health, and these happenings started occurring a number of times. Eventually, he figured out that he wasn't going to pass on. This wasn't going to be the end for him, and that he needed to get a handle on what this was all about. And so he started to explore. And as I read Journeys Out of the Body, it opened up my eyes because, as I said, when I was younger, I didn't have a lot of source material. I was alone, which is probably today why I do most of my projections by myself, because that's how it started. That's how I got used to doing it. It never occurred to me that I could have others with me, so I'm the most comfortable today by myself, although perhaps these videos is my way of getting together with others. At any rate, I traveled in space. I traveled in present here on Earth, but it never occurred to me that I could go into dimensions. It never occurred to me I could experience other realities and eventually learn to time travel. So his information in that Journeys Out of the Body book was invaluable to me. But Bob started exploring. He started the Institute. He started things like experimenting with what he called hemisync, which was very new when I first met him. But it's a way of using binaural beats to synchronize hemispheres in the brain to allow you to grow and experience altered states of consciousness. As his research continued, he came up with other ideas that could use out of the body experiences to assist others. He started. There was a place that he called a park, which they had established on the astral plane, and they would retrieve people who were lost on the astral plane. They'd passed on, and perhaps they didn't have lots of beliefs, or they just didn't know where to go. They were scared, and he and I guess some people with him would take people to this park where they could take stock of their lives before they went on to whatever rebirth or whatever astral plane they felt the most comfortable on. The interviewer said, "This sounds like a psychic tour service," and Bob, of course, laughed and said, "It's exactly that." And he said that once people recuperated, they could go, wherever it is that they needed to go. The interviewer then asked, "Well, what happens if a criminal knew that he had, done bad things in his life? Would he deserve punishment?" Bob said he was not an authority on that. It depends on what they do as they cool off from the passing over process. Then they can think about it. He said there are counselors, but they don't call themselves that, who are human, who help people get over these kinds of things. And I think and I agree with this type of information. We have this need in our physical life to punish people, to make them suffer because they made us suffer. If you think about it, it goes right back to the ancient code of Hammurabi, the first codified code that humans ever had. That's the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth code. And this was thousands and thousands of years ago. But to this day, we're still in the same situation. And, punishment. What does it really do for us? We discussed a little bit about eternal punishment in the last video. But I guess Bob's saying here that there's ways to recover from that type of philosophy. They're not looking to punish people. They're looking for them to reform, to understand what they did, to feel regret, and to reform, because that's what matters. We don't need more people suffering in this world and in other worlds. What we need are people reforming so they can turn around and help others in turn. That is something that is positive. That is a net positive. Next, Bob gets into talking about reincarnation and why we reincarnate. And this is a question I know is very much on many people's minds. So I'd like to share his beliefs on that. His mother was a classic illustration. She was a medical doctor. She had 4 children, of which, of course, he was one. She was also the wife of a college professor. Now, you have to remember, back in those days, first of all, her being a medical doctor was amazing. There were very few female medical doctors. But even then, it was assumed that the woman would give up her career aspirations to raise the family. And that's what happened in this situation. She got very busy taking care of these 4 kids, so she dropped her practice. But what seems to him that really affected her more than anything else was she was a very accomplished cellist. She played the cello very well, but she had to give it up. What she would do, though, during the holidays is she'd bring it out and she'd play, but then she'd put it away again. And when he wrote Journeys Out of the Body, he shared this book with her. She wanted to discuss it with him because she had started to astral project. And this is just something that, it's one of my little private theories. I believe everyone who is interested in astral projection can master it. But I also believe that there are probably certain family lines that are more conducive to the experience, to astral projection, to out-of-the-body experiences than others. I've noticed it in my own family as I've grown older and be able to talk to people who would share with me their own experiences. I didn't know my sister did it, and she had done it. My brother has done it. My daughter has done it. I've never had that frank discussion with my mother and my father, but I wonder. At any rate, she started astral projecting then, and but soon after she passed on, and I guess Bob did some explorations and found out that she had reincarnated almost immediately after she had passed from this lifetime, and that evidently he discovered that she was a 5-year-old and was a prodigy child violinist. So that certainly is very interesting. The interviewer then went on to say, so you're saying the earth plane is probably a place for us to learn? Bob said, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. I think we're here not only to learn, but to help others learn. Because really, if you think about it, if we're all connected, if you're helping someone else learn, you're still really helping yourself. So I'd like to thank everyone listening to this for helping me learn. Then the interviewer went on to ask Bob about the Monroe Institute. And as I said, during the 80s, I was privileged to be able to attend some seminars there. And it's a lovely place. They're a little on the pricey side, but I was single at the time, so I had all the money in the world. And it's just in a lovely area of Virginia, lovely walking paths, nature. It's just a beautiful, beautiful meditative place. And now that I'm talking about it, I want to go back. So if it's something that you can do, I would definitely recommend it, though. Anyway, so Bob talked about, he said, look, we have this advanced civilization. We spend a third of our life in a state that there's really not a lot of solid exploration. There's not a lot of science devoted to this third of our life. Because here in the West, we decided that the only thing that made sense, the only thing that had value, was the time we spent awake. Most likely the time we spent awake trying to acquire things, to acquire possessions. Bob talked about how they established a lot of research, and they study EEG patterns, and that's when they developed things like HemiSync and the Human Plus program. I don't have a lot of time to get into these things. If you're interested, I would direct you to the Monroe Institute site where you could learn about these different types of programs. And if you want to go there for yourself to check it out. Finally, the interviewer asked him, he said, do you believe that we are in the end time of our species? And I find this a very interesting question because it concerns me very much. There's this belief system in many areas of our world, especially in a variety of religious communities, that we're at the end times. Things are going to end very soon. And the reason I don't like this belief system is because it puts you in a frame of mind that, well, who cares about the future? Because after all, it's going to end pretty darn soon. And I think that is a very, very harmful state of being. If you believe you're going to die tomorrow, chances are you might find a way to make that happen. On the other hand, if you believe that you can build a new world tomorrow, then you're going to be headed in that direction. You're going to be looking to make that happen rather than an end for yourself. Bob said that no, he didn't believe that we were in the end time of our species. He had done some time travel research, and he had found that he believed that our species was ready for a giant leap forward, and that he believed that that was going to happen, because if it didn't, all that would happen is our species would stagnate. And anyone who knows anything about biology, who knows anything about the way living organisms and the way the world works, is really going forward, you're going backward. There's no such thing as stagnation. But he believed that the future was bright, and that if we could continue to harness these abilities that we have, that we've ignored here, especially in the West, that we could create a brand new future for humanity, and that he believed that we had the mind and the technology to achieve it. I hope you enjoyed this video talking about Robert Monroe. If you haven't read his books, especially Journeys Out of the Body, I would say that's mandatory reading for someone interested in out of the body experiences, astral projection. If you really enjoyed the book, you should read his other ones, Far Journeys and Ultimate Journey. Marvelous, marvelous books. If this video was enjoyable, please hit the like button, share it if you know someone who would benefit from this, and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have subscribed, please hit the bell button, because that way you'll be informed by all of my future videos. And as always, I will see you on the astral plane.